Welcome back, everyone, to the Founders Only podcast. I'm super excited today to welcome Becc Holland. Becc is the CEO of Flip the Script, a sales media company on a mission to shift how sellers see the world through the eyes of their buyers. A self-proclaimed victim of the craft, she's a true practitioner at heart, relentlessly driving change in modern sales. Welcome, Becc.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes. So let's start with, can you share your journey to becoming the founder of Flip the Script?
Oh man, to the inception of it, or my journey since
Inception.
The inception of it. I would definitely say it was not from what I think of, a prototypical background, meaning I didn't always dream of being an entrepreneur. I wasn't someone who really wanted to go into business for myself or had that set from when I was started. It was really, I was bitten by the bug of a couple of concepts that I believed were different than how the world saw them. And when it came to sales, and so kind of an allegiance or responsibility to those concepts, I begrudgingly went into business of like, okay, I have to see where these concepts go. I have to play them out. I have to do the research and put in the time and see if these can give another option to sellers who want to add a level of expertise to the conversation. And so because of that, I started Flip the Script to do it.
Awesome. So how long ago was that?
Okay, so coming up on actually 5 years ago is when I actually started the business. Now, I did a number of different pieces of content. I was in sales tech and MarTech, I had a cathexis around that kind of background beforehand. And so I started to do random YouTube videos at like 11 o'clock at night just to get out at some of the concepts that were helping my team. And started getting some traction. And again, it wasn't I want to get traction for this concept or for any other reason. But they started to take off a little bit. And so I started digging in more and more and more there. So I had about 2 years of precursor of doing different webinars and concepts and training after hours. I did several different sessions for free, and so I had about a 2-year background before I formally decided to launch the business.
Awesome. Okay. So let's go back to when you were a child. What types of things did you like to do? Were you entrepreneurial? Where are you from? Just tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so back as a kid, so I am from Texas originally. So I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and some of the things that kind of stand out to my background. Well, first of all, I come from a very technical family. Okay. So I'm the only one that's even close to the go-to-market side of the house. My dad he retired about 10 years ago, but he developed the fins on missile heads for the government and the defense division for 35 years. My mom was a biology professor. My sister, they're going to kill me if they ever hear this, if they ever hear me admitting this. My sister is the top 1% ER doctors in the nation. So wow. She set the 911 protocol for the state of Florida. Go Florida.
Wow.
I mean, she's very technical. And then my brother is a PhD electrical engineer that works on transformers and electrical grids for the government. And then I'm in sales. So it was a very, interesting household. And I spent a lot of my childhood not understanding what they were talking about and not understanding, a biologist talks to someone who's in electrical engineering. And to me, as the outsider, it's the same thing. I'm like, call a spade a spade. But I spent a lot of my childhood trying to understand very different technical fields and trying to translate what they were saying to the other person. And a lot of my childhood reading. So I fell in love with, since I was in middle school, at lunch in the bathroom stall, reading Charles Dickens and Victor Hugo. And that's where I really, found the love of reading and kind of my literature background. So all those components kind of yielded someone who's really technical, but then went into the field of sales as a result.
Now, how did you get into sales?
So I honestly, I kind of fell backwards into it. I was originally going to go to law school, like
Mm-hmm.
the idea in my head. So I took my LSAT for fun, like on the weekend. So I took Princeton review courses, and I just studied it kind of for fun. And I went to law school and studied a municipal court, basically worked with a judge there.
Okay.
And I got into it pretty deeply in terms of pre-law and contract law and tort law, and studied it very in depth. And then I had this realization that I'm like, when I was watching this judge, and he was brilliant, like went to Chicago Law, which is top 5 in the nation, absolutely brilliant, really nice guy. And I looked at his life and I thought, there is a lot of crap that he has to do. Like 95% of his day is just buried in paperwork. And that I didn't see that being a passion or something that I wanted to devote 95% of my time into. And so the other option, if you're a marketing major, the other option is 65% of the interviews were for sales. So I went into sales for a quite technical company right off the bat. It was a electrical HVAC plumbing, heating, lighting company that worked with governmental buildings and school districts. So the minimum floor was $2 million for a sale, for instance, and the shortest sales cycle was 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Yes to that, and came right out of school. And they're like, you should sell these multi-million-dollar projects. And I didn't know, what HVAC stood for. So I'm like, I have to figure out what the crap all this stuff is, and I got to figure out how to sell very quickly, because this is an enterprise level sale. So that's kind of how I started, but it was kind of by accident.
So you've created over 135 hours of free sales training content. What's the business model, or is there one, behind giving away so much value for free?
I mean, that is such a interesting, it's the first time that I've been asked, oddly enough. But I think it's such an interesting question. My passion, or my almost my why, if you will, is I believe truly that the sales industry is in a very dangerous spot.
Mm.
So for thousands of years, we have gone into the conversation thinking, what can we say to get the person to think a certain thing, or believe a certain thing, or believe that they should buy, or come out of the conversation more buyer ready. But the conversation has never truly been on what is good for the buyer. What would the buyer find valuable from the conversation, and that being the true North Star. And so coming across, there were several different evolutions of it, but there were several different brinks in my career where I discovered a concept, if you will, that would really help the buyer. And so my goal was, how do I publish these methods or these thoughts or these concepts so that anyone and everyone who wanted it could have access to it? So I kind of reorged the business model to fit that goal versus coming into market and that being kind of the secondary, tertiary goal. So right off the bat, I went to several different tech sponsors and I said, hey, you want leads? Yes. You want people who are interested in this conversation? They're like, yeah. They're like, completely. I'm like, I have an idea. Why don't I publish as much free content as I can around how you can sell and how you can prospect, and everything that like as much depth as I can go into, free decks, free videos, free everything that I can. And then anyone who quote unquote gates, like I'll hand back to you back as a lead. Now, my goal was, how can I get that education into the hands of anyone who needs it? I mean, if I'm a rep and I'm just coming into the business, like, what are my options? I can go watch a couple YouTube videos, or maybe I can see a trainer and think they have a couple thoughts, and I can go to my boss and ask my boss to go to their boss and like, can we get them to come in for a day? And then they come in for a day, and I might get a couple of minutes with them in the hallway, but I have no actual access to someone who like can coach me, someone who can in depth show me what I need to be doing in my role. So my idea was, how can I publish something in a way that they don't need me at all? They can have access to that for free, and then justify it on the back end to sales tech sponsors of like, they'll be watching these videos and then have them as a sponsorship. So I didn't even have my head on monetization, but I kind of feel like it was very Lord of the Rings. Like, the one who doesn't want the ring is the one who ends up getting the ring. Because my goal was, you watch these videos and you don't need me at all. And it was it was a true like newspaper, wide-eyed, doughy-eyed peddling, thought or vision. But what ended up happening was, obviously, with free videos, there's a lot of people who watch them. And so people would come to me and say like, hey, can you train my team more extensively on this? Or can you contextualize this, the buyer persona? So how I, quote unquote, monetize. So I paid off the training of the hub using tech sponsors. So they really footed the bill so that and everyone, totally could see the content. But then on the back end of that came, training, which is really how I, in the end, monetized.
That is just, I love this story so much. And I feel like it really, your thought process or how you came about to build this content model, if you will, was really super aligned with your whole mission of your business. Literally, the people on the other end, what is it that they need, and how do you give them value? How do you help them? And not what are you trying to sell? Like that was literally the mission of your business. Oh. So you said that the best practice isn't working. And you also just said that sales is in a dangerous place. But the best practice isn't working for sales teams today. So what's some of the most common mistakes that you see B2B SaaS founders specifically making in their sales approach, or these B2B SaaS companies making in their sales approach, and what should they do instead?
Yeah, that's a big question, a good question, but a big question. What I mean by it's in a dangerous spot is I don't think there really is any role for the seller, meaning the modern day seller as we've been selling is, again, how do I come to the conversation? How do I make them believe something? Or how do I make them say they're in pain? Or how do I make them admit, or agree to a mutual action plan so that they will agree to move forward and sign on the dotted line and do all. And I'm like, that's great. Or how do I get them to even admit how much pain they're in and what's the impact if they don't move forward? And I'm like, that's all great, but that's all stuff that they already knew. Meaning that's nothing new to them. And if they give you that leverage, if anyone on the selling end, and buyers today know this, of like, if I tell you how bad I'm in pain, or I tell you the impact of why I didn't move forward, I'm going to put you on the spot. Mia, what can you do to me as a seller if I tell you all the reasons why I need to buy? What would you do to me as a seller?
Am I the seller or are you the seller?
If you're the seller and I tell you,
I'm going to leverage it. I'm going to turn it around and see how I can get you to buy my product by leveraging the pain you told me.
Totally. And so buyers today know that, even admitting all of the current state, everything that I know, that's at the expense of the buyer. Of like, I can leverage it against you saying why you need to buy, or I'm confused. What, like you said that by this date, if this didn't happen, that you wouldn't move forward, or I can hold my guts in pricing, so to speak. Why would I give a discount to anyone, who really, really needs it? And so when I look at the sales industry and I look at all of the practices that we're doing today, I don't see techniques and methodologies that need a little bit of tweaking. I see a fundamental misunderstanding of the way people buy. So the reasons that people buy is they're in trouble. They have a problem that they need to solve. And so looking at the sales industry, I think why it's respectfully broken, and I say that it's broken, I mean it with all respect and responsibility for that, of 85% of AEs aren't hitting 76% of quota, 76% of SDRs aren't hitting quota. I mean, like, the thing's in the tank, and it has been for a while. And I feel like everyone's nodding their head and saying like, yeah, this thing needs to be tweaked a little bit or a little bit or a little bit. And I'm like, can we all just like look up for a second? Yeah. And like look around and realize this thing needs to be gutted. So the main thing that I believe is that the cathexis, or the fulcrum of why it's not working, is the goal of the seller is to get the person to buy, as opposed to the goal of the seller is to find things that the buyer doesn't know and help them through that and misunderstanding or things that they've missed. So there's a number of things that your buyer has missed, like just from the statistics view. They either have things that they believe that aren't true, which I kind of coin as a misdiagnosis, or things that they're completely unaware of at all, which is a misdiagnosis. And all of those opportunities are the opportunities that a seller has to find, add value, and make the world a better place for the buyer. So if that one, I think it's a simple shift. It's not an easy shift because of the ingrained, idea. Like, it's almost like if you think about, if I were to tell you tomorrow that gravity wasn't real, it's a simple conceptual shift, but it's not an easy one because it affects every single thing in your day. And you have believed for the longest time that gravity is real, right? So if sellers could just change their mindset to, my number one North Star is to help this person solve their problem and find things that they don't know about throughout that process. And if that shift were to simply happen, I think it would, you just see never ending ripple effects of that throughout the conversation of sales, but it isn't, it hasn't yet. So I think that's the main punchline shift that needs to happen for it to change the role.
Maybe about 3 years ago, I was hiring my first salesperson for my company.
Yeah.
And I had no clue about sales. I mean, sales really did seem at the time to me super, abstract is not the word I'm going for, but it was just so far removed from me, right?
Yeah.
Like how you talked about electrical engineering or something like that. It really was far away from me as a founder. I just couldn't, I didn't want, it was like the ugly stepchild. I didn't want to have anything to do with it, but it's absolutely necessary, right? To drive revenue.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get out of founder-led sales as quickly as possible, but I hadn't done the work, and we're not even going to go down that path or that conversation of all the things that founders need to do in order to get out of founder-led sales. That's not really the conversation today, but I had hired a salesperson who also had no experience and a young person. And I was scrambling, trying to help them learn sales frameworks and things like that. And I found some really great resources online on YouTube and things like that. And I gave it to them, and it still wasn't working, and they weren't making any sales.
Yeah.
And finally, I said to them, very casually, I said, why don't you stop worrying about this is probably wasn't the right way to say this, but why don't you stop worrying about making a sale and making a commission and just try to help these people?
Yeah.
We have a solution that actually helps people. Why don't you just take the pressure off yourself and just try to answer their questions, try to be helpful, try to give them the information? Well, that still didn't work for them. I'm pretty sure they weren't able to make that mindset shift. That's probably why it didn't happen, but it worked for me. Eventually, I got back in founder-led sales after hiring two failed salespeople and not able to train them up. And I finally, learned that I needed to document and build a sales process that had been validated and worked and was being tracked in terms of metrics and performance, and where we could, reverse engineer the sales math problem, so to speak. But anyway, I'm curious how you think prospecting, and I know this is a little bit of a segue here from the conversation, but how do you think prospecting is impacted by this concept that you have? And I'll be more specific because I know prospecting is like this really big bucket of a really big topic. But if you take the position as a salesperson that let's just try to help people and drive value and not try to sell people. If you don't prospect correctly, you still don't end up with sales. So I'm curious about what you think about that and what needs to change, or what the focus needs to be for sales teams to perfect the prospecting process so that they can flip the script on the sales process.
Yeah, it's a good point and it's a good question. I don't know if you meant it to be a point, but I think, um, well, what I mean by help is helping the buyer in their role to solve the problem that they need to solve and some problems that they didn't know existed at all. So inherently what comes along with that, and I think what happened in your experience too, is I can't just try to generally be helpful. I need to know their role and know their role even better and more than they do. So
Mm,
it's, if I'm selling to a CTO, I don't need to learn how to objection handle. I don't need to learn how to whatever have a permission based opener or pattern interrupt. The thing that I need to learn above all are what are the metrics that a CTO is measured on? What are the industry averages of those metrics? At what point do they cause a problem? So that when they say that they don't have a problem with network latency, and I'm like, what is it? And they say it's at a certain rate, and I'm like, well, actually, industry average is this. Anything below, blank is going to cause server uptime issues or server downtime issues. So, the value is not only how are they doing in comparison to their peers, but what are the things that they believe that aren't true? So to be able to do that, and I think the hump for most salespeople is like, well, how on earth am I going to, pick let's say that you have 6 buyer personas. You sell into CIO and IT director, and you sell into procurement, and you sell into HR, and you sell into finance,
right,
and you sell into like, those are very, very different buyer personas. So someone
right.
says, like, looks at that hump and says like, how on earth could I add value to a CFO, for instance, when I've never been a CFO, when I've never been in finance? And that was the same problem that I had as a kid. What on earth thing could I add to the conversation when I've never been an electrical engineer, or I've never been a mechanical engineer or civil engineer, or, looked into medicine? Like, what value can I add to the conversation? And
Yeah.
I think just breaking it down to where, and I've used, statistical research of like, okay, in 15 minutes, how can I find the top 20 metrics that this person cares about? What's the industry average, and what point do they cause a problem? All of a sudden, much more than your buyer does. Cause I'm like, okay, if you
Mm,
take a step back, like, just because I'm in sales doesn't mean, like, if I'm listening to this, and I would ask myself this question, just because I'm in sales, do I know the average open rate for cold emails? Do I know at what point it means that I'm typically missing quota? Do I know at what point at the typical industry average reply rate? Do I know the open rate that means that I have an email deliverability problem? So industry average open rate is 15 to 25%. Industry average reply rate is 0.5 to 0.7%. If you have anything less than a 50% open rate, then you have a deliverability issue, period. So instead of
mm.
focusing on quality, you should be focusing on deliverability. You can learn that in 15 minutes. So I'm like, just learning those statistics and focusing on when you look at an onboarding program. And I think a lot of the things that probably came inherent to you is you knew about the buyer, right? So you have a sales rep that comes in and it's like, well, be helpful. And they're like, well, I don't know about the buyer. Like, founders their starting ground is, I know a problem for the buyer because I am the buyer. And so they
Uh-huh.
go in with all that problem knowledge, like, in their head, but then someone
Yeah.
with quote unquote sales experience or none comes in and says, I'm going to try and be helpful. And it's like, well, how can you be helpful if you don't know anything about the buyer? So they start to generally be helpful of like, here's a Diet Coke, and here's
Right.
like, in your personal life, you have kids and one of them's sick. So here's some, like, I don't know, like wipies for their nose, or like all these generic things, which is fine. But trust is defined as, I have to trust in that you're telling me the truth. I have to trust in your agenda. But the third element of it is I have to trust in your ability. And salespeople, your ability cannot be objection handling. That's not helpful for the buyer. Your ability is in their actual role. So the goal of prospecting or discover, like, I see selling and prospecting as just two forms of the same thing. In prospecting, if I'm going outbound, I'm like, you have to keep in mind, object emotion stays emotion, object at rest stays at rest. If you're going outbound, your buyer's at rest, which means based on what they know, the pain's not bad enough or the impact's not bad enough for them to actually do something about it. So even if they admit that pain and they tell you the details, they're not going to move forward. Industry average conversion for inbound is 35%. Outbound is 6. 6, because they don't have a problem that's big enough. So I'm like, when you're prospecting into someone, if you're leading any email that says, we work with people who struggle with blank, by definition, if they can say I'm in that group, it means that the problem isn't bad enough for them to do something about, because you're going outbound. So you have to find something new that they didn't know about, that beforehand they were fine. But now, knowing what they know now about themselves, they're saying, I need to buy and move forward or change because I didn't know what this prospector just brought up. But all of that is going to come back to, how much do I know about the buyer that I'm calling into? If you don't know anything, it does not matter what permission-based opener you use, what little hook or what little objection handle, they won't want to talk to you. The stats will show that 82% of buyers don't want to talk to a seller, regardless of the selling process, if it's for an enterprise software solution or stick of gum. So I'm like, if you don't change that dial, that you know something about them, you can say it in any tone that you want, but at the end of the day, they're not going to want you around.
Meet Brandy, your all-in-one content creation sidekick designed to make creating and managing your brand's content effortless. Let me show you how it works. Got a team? Bring them in. With Brandy, everyone can pitch in to create content that clicks. Managing multiple brands? Easily switch between profiles so you're always ready for the next project. The Brand Voice Analyzer ensures your content always sounds like you. Stuck on where to start? Check out our handy prompt templates. They're like creative jumpstarts to get things moving. Every edit, every version saved. With content revision history, nothing gets lost, and you can always pick up right where you left off. Everything your brand needs, it's all right here in your brand asset library. Stay organized like a pro with custom folders for every project. No more hunting for that one file. Brandy does too, and is ready to help you connect. Or in any language, really. Speak to your audience in the words they know best. Need ideas or have questions? Just ask Brandy. Save time with custom snippets. Your most used phrases, always handy when you need them. Keep your notes, links, and ideas in one spot, so you're never hunting for that one piece of inspiration. Get personalized content tips and SEO strategies to help your brand stand out online. Join Brandy today and make your content creation smarter, faster, and better. Let's create something amazing.
That was a long rant. Sorry.
No, it was not. No, it was not. It was great. Absolutely great. Absolutely great. For founders who are in the $1 to $10 million revenue range, what would you say are some of the most critical sales processes or playbooks, if you subscribe to that, those tools that they should have in place before they scale their sales team? What do they need in place before you start building out that sales team?
Yeah. Well, I would say I'm going to try and go an angle that probably has not been said before, because there's a lot of common heavy hitters of like, oh, well, you need to have stages set. You need to have, the value prop set. I think the number one thing that is not set for people that they normally need to have, but they don't have, well, two things. The first is that you have an somewhat exhaustive library of what it means to be your buyer, and that when your seller is onboarding, that's all they're inundated with. Sellers don't fail because they don't know how to log into a CRM. Sellers don't fail because they don't know how to change the stages from negotiation to close lost or proposal or whatever that is. Sellers fail because they don't know about the buyer. So I'd say the first thing that needs to happen, and before anything, it's like if I'm onboarding, I'm going to get the founder story and the vision and the why and okay, this is Tina in marketing and on and on. Before any of that, or certainly supplementary to that, it's like, here is 2 weeks on our buyers. We have 6 buyers. We're going to spend a day on each. We're going to do the morning on their metrics. We're going to do, the afternoon on the industry averages. And we're going to do it, the finish with at what point those cause a problem for each single buyer for 2 weeks. So I'd say that is inherent and not a customer story of how they used your product. Like the story's fine, but I need to know at scale, what is the specific problem or metric they're attacking as a buyer using hypothetically my product, but just in general. What are the statistics that they're worried about? What are the numbers that they're worried about? If they're a buyer, they are responsible for number. The only difference between buyer personas internally is what KPIs am I responsible for, you know? So it's like, what are those, an exhaustive library around that? I would say that's the first one. The second one, and this is more of a warning one, something I've seen a lot of organizations do, is they will have one seller and they're like, well, this seller is having 200 demo, initial discovery meetings a month. And so to get to this number, we need to have 800 discovery meetings a month. So I just need to hire 3 more sellers, hypothetically. Like, and it's the basic math misunderstanding that I see almost every company go through. I'm like, yeah, but those 200 discovery meetings, 198 of them were inbound. So when you hire 3 other people, you just took that 198 and you just divided it among 3 people. So now you have 50 inbound meetings per rep, and they have to make the 150 up that you're expecting them to do on outbound. And then even started the outbound motion. So they get to somewhere around, 285 as a group, because they started to do outbound and it was like actually quite good. They booked 15, 20 outbound meetings a month. But they're like, what the hell? Why are we so far short of 800? Because they didn't realize that inbound and outbound, you need to take inbound as a quote unquote given and say, okay, from an outbound perspective, what am I expecting each one of these sellers to do? Because all I'm going to do with that inbound is cut that pot further and further and further as I do. So you need to account for that of like, I'm going to put this pot aside and say, I expect, or I think that a seller would be able to book 5, 10, 15 meetings realistically on outbound, and do the walk back into the math that way as opposed to flying out.
So start from like the rep, what the capacity is of a rep, rather than reverse engineering like your sales goals.
Totally.
Got it. Okay.
Like, I need 800 discovery meetings, and so I just hire 3 more. And I'm like, but the inbound is going to stay the same. So I think that's something people need to keep in mind when they're thinking about how do I quote unquote scale this thing. How you scale it is, either marketing efforts, and you need to account for that, or, but from the sales rep perspective, when you're hiring a sales rep, the only thing you can really expect is, outbound and then the inbound.
Right. In terms of activities. Yeah. Makes sense. So how do you feel, and you just talked about this a little bit, but let's talk about cold outreach as it's been impacted by AI. So, so many people in the sales industry will say, you got to do the cold outreach. It's absolute key part of your prospecting and building your pipeline. But as someone who is not doing active sales every day, I'm, gosh, please leave me alone. I mean, it's everywhere. It's so pervasive.
Right.
So for me, honestly, I feel like I don't want to do cold outreach, because I'm just like, it's such, I don't even know how to even explain, as a founder of an AI company, PS, right? So I'm not knocking AI by any stretch, but it's just like, how do we find this balance in the sales, from the sales perspective, of when and how much cold outreach do we do now that AI has really overrun it? How does it fit into the tactical plan? Does that question make sense?
I mean, are you saying how does AI impact the role of a prospector today? How can they use it and when can they use it? Or
like how more so, how do you determine how much cold outreach you should do if you are considering the impact of AI as part of that decision. So like, let's say that you are, a sales leader and you're like, hey, AI is a tool. We're going to use it. I don't care that, all of my competitors are now using it and that the buyer can't tell most of the time, especially because as you said, a lot of people think that they can just write a good hook and not have that key information, helpful information in there. So if everybody's doing the same thing and it's hard to distinguish from you and your competitors as you're using AI, how do you decide how much cold outreach to do, or do you just not do it? I mean, I just feel like it's really it's a personal problem for me that I feel other people must be dealing with, other founders who are afraid to do AI enabled cold outreach, because it's like, I don't want my brand tainted by that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Oh, well, I first of all think that's commendable of just thinking about, I don't want this email landing in someone's inbox because I know it's not helpful. So why would I want, but it's so interesting to me, the conversation of AI, because people are like, okay, well, AI can do so much stuff. And I'm like, well, hold on. Before AI, it still wasn't working. So now you're talking about putting gas on that and cutting, AI is, let's say, hypothetically 85% of human intelligence. So you're talking about cutting that down 15% and then ramping up the volume. Like, the thing was in the tank beforehand. So I'm like, and I say this with all empathy, I think it was because, again, there was a misunderstanding of what is prospecting. People thought, okay, well, prospecting is telling people about my product. And it's like, okay, we're the number one blank who helps blank do blank. We work with blank, blank, and blank, 15 minutes, quick call, cheers, 15 minutes, hope you're well, hope you and your kids are safe. Certain times, like, that is the template, and everyone thinks it's so different. It's like, I can name 250 words. Is really impressed by your profile. My CEO sent me your way. I'm like, I could go on a rattle of like the 250 words that
absolutely
used in the template. But it's like, the template beforehand and afterwards for AI should have always been, in my opinion, if I can teach you something hypothetically about the problem that you're trying to solve, that is the outreach. People are not, sellers are not losing deals because the status quo hasn't been overcome. There's status quo and there's indecision. So it's like, status quo is, I'm losing the deal because they don't think the problem's big enough. And you lose 40% of your deals there. 60% of the time you lose it to indecision. They do think the problem's big enough, but they still don't close anyway. And the three things that they're statistically scared of is that they pick the wrong product. There's too much information for them to be able to disseminate what's relevant. But the biggest one is outcome uncertainty, that they're not sure that even if they bought the right product and even if they use the right way, they're still going to get their outcome. So enters omission bias, which is 2 to 3x psychologically stronger, that they want to stay still versus making an action and like messing up the decision, not being able to hit the outcome. So people are scared of what happens if they take action, not what happens if they don't. So most people are coming in and they're trying to cost of an action sale or ROI sale. Here's all the benefits and things that are going to happen. You're going to save time and you're going to save money, or they throw discounts at them, or they do the cost of an action play, which is the most dangerous one. They're like, this is what's going to happen to you if you don't stay still. I'm like, that's fine. But Brendan, they are scared what happens if they don't stand still. And if that decision doesn't actually yield what they wanted it to yield. That's why they're introducing so many stakeholders. So you have like upwards of 15 stakeholders in mid-market deals. It's not because they want everyone's take. They want to
fair.
Totally. They're like
their responsibility out.
Totally. Brilliant. I want to like dole out this responsibility of what happens if the decision goes wrong. So the thing that needs to decrease is their fear that they're going to make the wrong decision. So people attack that a lot of times by saying like, I'm just going to tell them that I'm confident or I'm X, Y, and Z. I'm like, the one thing that's going to help them is if they know more, yes. But if they have someone that clearly knows more than they do, that's attached to them, that it's almost like, I think of like, can I do 1 pull-up? Maybe, maybe not, but I have a goal of doing 5 pull-ups. Like that's the outcome. It's not that I need to get better at the pull-ups. It's like, does someone come underneath me and start pushing me up? That I'm like, with this person, of course I can do 5 pull-ups. I could do 10 pull-ups or 15. And that is the role of the seller. So I'm like, from a prospecting perspective, if you come in and you're like, hey, what is your email open rate, if you don't mind me asking? The reason that I ask is industry average is 15 to 25, anything below 50, and you have an email deliverability problem. If you do me a favor, go back and check internally. If it's anything less than 35, give me 15 minutes and I can give you a couple of quick tips of how, like custom tracking links, DKIM, DMARC, SPF, like if nothing else, if you never want to talk to me again, you can walk away and take those, out to your team. So it's like the 15-minute meeting or the 30-minute meeting is to help them understand more, whether they use you or not, how to solve that problem of email deliverability and how to get in a better spot in terms of prospecting. But people instead, they say, I'm going to get crystal clear on who we work with. I'm like, they don't care. They don't care who you work with. They care, can you help me? And if you can help me, how can you help me? And I'm like, the first leading point of that is like, here's a statistic of people who, a clear identifier, not saying like, do you have bad email open rates? Do you have bad cold emails? They can't even answer that. What's bad? You have to like weigh in on the decision of what they think is bad. But if you ask them a clear statistic of like, are you anywhere from blank to blank? Are you sending emails Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. statistically? Because I know that that's the worst time of day to be sending them. They don't know that. And that is the gap of like where I can add value. So from a prospecting perspective, I think AI can be extremely helpful. It has been to me. It's been helpful to me though, to get to know my buyer better, right? Not to write a cleaner template or to X, Y, and Z. I'm like anything over 50 emails a day, and it's going to cook your deliverability anyway. So really the North Star metric is how do I send 45 emails or 40 emails to people that have a piece of personalized information that hooks into something from a relevance perspective that they didn't know about their role. If you can ask them a question and then tell them briefly why you're asking that question of like, are you sending emails Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, before 12 p.m., like more than 60% of your emails then. The reason I ask is statistically speaking, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 5 minutes before the hour and after the hour, increasingly throughout the day and throughout the week are going to be your better hit times, but the majority of teams are sending them Monday morning. If you do me a favor, go back and check internally. And if this happens, then like you're off the hook. If you're anything above a 50% open rate, I don't even want to talk to you again. Like I honestly want to take tips from you. But if you're below 45%, can you give me a shot Thursday at 2 to, and the meeting becomes I hate the idea of being salesy.
Value add.
Right. It's like, I hate the idea that sellers hate being salesy too. They know it. So I'm like, turn the conversation into how can I figure out enough things about them to where my advice is crystal that helps them whether they work with me or not. And then no next steps. I'm like, it was nice meeting you. Here's the proposal with these 3 options. If you need any help, let me know. I'm not going to send you any more emails though. And like, then whether you work with them or not, at least in the crux of your being, they can very likely solve their problem better because of your existence.
This is so great. I'm having a thought now of how this parallels to finding your husband or wife dating. I really think because, just on the first date, am I trying to get you to marry me? No, I'm not. I'm trying to learn everything I can about you to see if it's a match.
Yeah. Right.
And this is really what you're talking about. I mean, I see a parallel here very much. And then what do people do when they go on a first date with someone, and they're like, oh my God, this person's marriage material. I better snap them up before somebody else does, So I think it's great. It's great. Okay. So we've talked about a little bit about metrics, but not too much. actually, you have talked about metrics, but interestingly enough, you haven't talked so much about sales metrics. You've talked
Yeah,
about the buyer's metrics.
right.
I love that. I mean, really, I really love that. So, what about, let's talk a little bit about sales metrics and signals that what you're doing is right.
Yeah,
Beyond the revenue going up, which is, of course, the most important thing, right?
yeah.
Closing deals. Are there any other signals or metrics that should be that are really important to track to determine the health of your sales process?
Oh yeah. Healthier sales process. Okay. Well, you want to go prospecting first or selling first? Of what?
Prospecting.
Okay, prospecting. So, industry average of someone who's full-time prospecting, they're going to send around 35 to 40 emails a day. I'd say anything less than 50 and you're clear in terms of deliverability. And they're making around 40 dials a day, but those are only yielding about 4 connects. So I'd say the first interesting thing that I would say to do with your teams is, instead of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning or all day, like doing the prospecting efforts equally, I would spend Monday and Tuesday doing the account research and writing the emails and like doing all the background work of the one-on-ones, or like do any of that on Monday and Tuesday. And then Wednesday afternoon, Thursday afternoon, Friday afternoon is when you're doing all your actual prospecting, when you're sending the emails, when you're actually making the dials, when you're having the conversations. That's just where you're going to get more pickups. So I'd say that's the first interesting one. 15 to 25% is the average open rate. Again, anything less than 50% and you have an email deliverability problem. So one of the biggest ones that I think that people don't know about is email deliverability. So what that means is there's email delivery and email deliverability. Email delivery is, did the servers of the inbox provider for my prospect actually receive the email? That should be 99%. You have soft bounces and hard bounces. Soft bounces, like the servers are down. Hard bounces is you had the wrong information, but that's not where you lose most people. Email deliverability is, once this server got the email, where did it go? So it could go to spam, it could go to social promotions, it could go to the primary inbox. Only 59% of emails actually make it to the primary inbox. So the bigger conversation is, instead of thinking just about quality, is how do I get more of my emails actually in that primary inbox? So a couple of the tips that I tell people: less links, the better. So if you have, you're a link to your website and a link to a phone number and a link to a piece of content, a link to a piece, like almost guaranteed they won't deliver it. So basically what I say, Google has 20,000 engineers on staff. I'd guess 19,000 of them are after us. Meaning I kid you not, I think they are. And what they're looking for is non-human behavior. They're like, okay, does this person look like a robot or does this person not look like a robot? I'm like, yeah, it's their full-time job to count out people like us, dweebs just like me. So the things that they're looking for, anything that contributes or is bad upon the inbox experience for the person receiving it. So anytime that someone opens your email, forwards your email, replies to your email, saves it from spam, or marks you as a contact, you get positive deliverability points. Anytime someone marks you as spam, says unsubscribe, deletes your email, especially if they delete before opening, it's negative deliverability points. And your deliverability score, or your domain health, is over time, and it's as a team. So if I do something, negative, it's going to affect Mia. If Mia does something positive, it's going to affect me. So my biggest tips would be think of or look into a custom tracking link. Look into DKIM, look into DMARC, look into SPF. That's 50% of deliverability is the technical end. And the other 50% of deliverability is traits and habits. So I would remove all the links that you can. I would look into a certain amount of words that are going to flag. So free is for sure going to be the most deleterious, but even ones like discount, off, trial, offer, problem, solution, increase, any of those words are going to increase the chance it's not delivered. You're okay on images. Anything less than 4, GIFs will actually, or GIFs, however you want to say it, will actually hurt you. Any kind of LinkedIn, if you were to say like your LinkedIn profile in the subject line, it's going to hurt you because it's going to flag it to social promotions. and if subject lines are all the same. So every single subject that you send or email that you send should have a different subject line, because why would you need to send the same subject line to multiple people? So even if it's I send 5 of the same subject line and Mia does, but it's to a completely different people, it's going to count as the same domain. So I'd say that's a very important statistic. Another important statistic, really important statistic, is for inbound conversion. So only 9% of people who raise their hand of I want to see your product actually get a first meeting with an AE. So like, because of whoops, yeah. Here's what sucks is totally 9%. The highest I've ever seen is 22.5. The lowest I've seen is 4, but the average is 9 of I become a hand raiser. Look at your face.
I'm waiting for the pin to drop. How is this possible?
So I know. Okay. So anything after basically 5 minutes, if you reach out after 5 minutes, that you're toast from a conversion perspective.
Wow.
Here's what's even more dangerous. 70% of people are going to end up going with the vendor who gets back with them first. Right. So let's talk about if they request a demo on the weekend. Let's talk about if they request demo after hours. So anytime you change channels, if you're like, thanks for your demo request, and then you email them, you already scour out about 40% of people, because if you use email address, it might not even end up in their inbox. So I would look into that process very carefully. And the justification is, well, I want to make sure I protect my AE's calendar. I'm like, you're protecting it pretty tight.
Oh yeah, yep.
Everyone to get away. So you're scouring off anyone that's actually interested. So that's definitely a statistic I would look into. But yeah, another one is no shows. So you are 4 times more likely essentially to get a no-show if you scheduled the meeting in the morning versus the afternoon for the prospect. So the day is immaterial, relatively speaking. Now, Friday's a little bit higher on no-shows, but same day is the best. Anything outside of 5 days, basically, that you're scheduling the meeting, and you're going to see a massive drop-off. So I'd say under 5 days and in the afternoon is when I would schedule for no-shows. And the last statistic I would say from the selling perspective is if you offer a discount, or you try to sell ROI, or you try to sell COI, meaning you're like, remember what happens when you said blah, 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 I'm confused. You kiss the deal goodbye. Like it's going to triple down on their fear. You're using fear when they're already afraid. They're already afraid it won't work, and you're going full court press with more fear. So they're just going to ghost you. They're going to ghost you and the deal's over. 84% likelihood. So I'd say those are important statistics, I would say, from prospecting and selling that people need to keep in mind, whenever they're coming to tech. Wow. Yeah, that inbound one is killer, right?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
9%. Get a first.
Yeah. So that's why, that's really why these demo requests and things like that, or scheduling meetings, they really need to be, there needs to, from my perspective, from my opinion, the inbound form needs to pre-qualify automatically. And then from there, allow them to instantly book the qualified people.
Brilliant.
That
what you said there. If people were to do that, they're like, no, I want to get them on a call. I'm like, why? So you can ask them the same BANT questions. Like, if they're the decision, you are costing yourself. I'm like, the amount of churn just based on that, like, to your point.
Yep.
Wild.
So
I noticed your process kind of booking this. I was like, she is on point. I was like, just your level of detail and the level of context that came with it. I was like, I'm a fan on a side note. So
I got Beck's approval, y'all. Okay.
For real. I was like, the context that came with and the meeting reminders. I was like, man, I bet you she sees no churn on that inbound.
Nope.
Yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
So let's talk about how AI is impacting scaling content creation specifically. So how do you, you really are far ahead of so many of your colleagues in the sales space in terms of building an authentic or scaling your content authentically. Sorry. So how do you feel about AI assisted content, specifically for the purpose of scaling content? And how can you or other founders maintain that voice, that authenticity, that differentiation, brand positioning while leveraging AI?
Yeah. You know, I log in to LinkedIn or wherever, and at this point, I just feel like it's the same post over and over and over and over and over again. And it makes me so sad because the goal has become, how do I produce content? But I'm like, the North Star should be, I have a different idea that I have, I have all allegiance to, of like, I need to get this idea out because it's different, because I want to, like, the goal shouldn't even necessarily be that I get in front of people. Like, I hear people say this all the time. They're like, if you want to get known for something, pick a topic and start talking about it. I'm like, do you have any idea how selfish that is? Mm-hmm. I'm like, for the craft or for the topic. And I'll hear the idea or the concept of there's no original content. And I'm like, well, that sucks, because we have original problems that we have not solved yet. So in my opinion, my plea with the community would be, if you have a point of view or you have an idea that has, in your actual practice, you've seen turn things around, that you need to think about, yes, a couple of items of like, how does this scale or apply to other people? But those need to be the voices that come forward. And how do I scale that opinion versus how do I just start talking? I mean, I look through the dross, and it's not, I'm not saying this disrespectfully. I'm almost saying this with almost a tinge of anger of like, hey, yeah, we need to clean out all this sludge. I don't even know what this is. We need to pave the way to because I know they're out there. I know there are other content creators that are out there that have original ideas or have original things that are working in their practice, and I'm like, well, the first part is just put down the mic. If you don't have one of those, it can't be, let me come up with a playbook because I have a webinar later. It should be, I have this playbook and I have to go on this webinar because of it. Like that, until that math is correct, I don't think that I'm going to say this and people are probably going to want me dead, but I'm like, I don't think that the content community is worth much until that math is reversed of, it should be scaling and putting the megaphone on not only the voices, but the concepts and the ideas that will make a difference and actually change the industry and change people's thought pattern for the better. So I'm like, if I, at the end of my career or when I'm dead or whatever, if people think of me, I hope the only thing that comes to their mind is concepts, that it has nothing to do with me, of like concepts that actually truly worked in their practice and affected their day-to-day better. If not, then my career was worth nothing. It meant nothing, So in terms of AI, there are a lot of things that you can do to support once you do have those opinions. But I think if those opinions aren't developed first and aren't the impetus behind someone coming into market, I'm kind of like, I kind of wish I could delete your profile for a minute of like, let's just put the mute button of like, there are some people out there, who have these ideas. And I know that they're out there because sometimes in the trenches, I'll come across someone and I'm like, why haven't you? And they're like, oh, I'm not going to get involved with that. And I'm like, I have to put aside my own selfish, self-righteous indignation for a second, that I'm like, okay, everyone's just after, what they're after. And I'm not going to question. I'm not after anyone's money, or I'm not after anyone's boat, or after anyone's, whatever. But I think that that's important, that if someone does have an idea, that you foster that idea, that you strengthen that idea, that you put that idea through the fire, and then you do something about that idea. I didn't want to start Flip the Script. I didn't want to do my own taxes. I still don't want to be an entrepreneur.
Amen.
I really don't. I mean, most of my day, I'm like, why do I have to do this thing? I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I feel like a Labrador retriever walking on a grate, that I'm like, I don't want to do this, but I'm like, the other thing I don't want to do is have my ideas, if they could help someone else, die with me, because I didn't want to do my taxes for myself. And so, I'm like, it's not necessarily of like, people are like, sometimes they'll say like, oh, I have imposter syndrome, so what I should do is look in the mirror and say I'm not an imposter. I'm like, or you should become less an imposter. That, like, I'm trying to learn French. I moved to Paris and I didn't know any, right? I don't need to go hype myself up in the mirror that I know more French. I just need to learn more French. Like, that's what helps me in the day-to-day. So I think if we could have a turn in that content community of, let's not only get back to what's important, but I need to genuinely ask myself, is the idea that I have, do I know that it works? Have I actually seen it in practice? And is it different than everything else that I see out there? If those 3 questions aren't answered, I don't think the content button should hit play, right? For the market's sake. And I know that that's completely selfish, and it's completely, I have the luxury of saying that, meaning from a fiscal point of view. I understand that some people just, need to make money and whatever it is. But I'm hungry for those. There's a certain amount of people, Steve Jobs, Jack Dorsey, whoever it is, of like, their contribution to society was just moving the craft forward. That's what it was. And I'm hungry for where those other 0.01% are, 0.02% are, 0.03% are, that can do that for the craft, because it needs it. I mean, it's in a really, bad spot. So how can we find those people? How can we get those people the mic? How can we foster those people? And then how can we use AI to back up those opinions, to get those opinions out to as many people as need them, is where my head's kind of out.
So what I hear you saying overall is that it's important that we ideate and be clear on where we can be thought leaders and where our expertise lies, and what, kind of flesh that out from the human perspective first. And then you can leverage AI as a tool to literally scale the production of the content around the ideas that you own.
For sure. Okay.
Totally agree.
AI has been so helpful for me to, in a snapshot, find out the metrics that someone is metriced on. So I can walk into a training at this point, and I can say to a client, like, I can say to a room full of 150 sellers, I would guess I know more about your buyer than 98% of the sellers in this room. Here's what's scary. I learned that on the drive here. And the reason I can do that is because of AI. However, to your point, AI is just it's a tool. So it's, where is the tool pointed at and why? That's the more important thing that we can use the tool to support.
So what is one book, podcast, or resource that has profoundly impacted your perspective and mindset as a founder?
Oh man. Okay. I'll name it, Dead or Alive. Dead or Alive.
Let's go with Dead.
Dead. Charles Dickens, for sure. Charles Dickens, all 3 of the Bronte sisters, Anne Bronte most importantly, Victor Hugo. He wrote Les Miserables forever, or Les Mis is what people call it. Thomas Hardy. Yeah, I would say that's a good start. That's a good start in terms of George Eliot. Yeah.
How did they impact your mindset as a founder?
Dickens specifically made me not scared, more so, like, he reversed the math on being detailed for me, of like, and he drove home for me, you don't have to say something to say something. It's actually more valuable when you don't. Through all of his different, writing, like, he never, quote unquote, did a biography. Now, technically, David Copperfield is supposedly mirrored to his life, but he was paid per word. And so all of his writings, I mean, his sentences, are like a paragraph long. I mean, each one of them that you're like, okay, I think I understand what he said. And this is what I was reading since I was, very, very young. And how he changed my mindset as a founder. I think that everyone takes it out on their community and their prospects or their buyers too lightly. They think that they know so little, and so they're very simple with them. And I find that you can be complex with someone, and actually there's a lot of value to that. So most of my content is not short form. I very rarely have short form content. It's a 2.5 hour video. It's like, good luck, everyone. Here's the deck. And everyone's always telling me, snippets, Becc, snippets, like just keep it short, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I think that there's value to longer form. Like I can't get a real point across in a LinkedIn post. I can't change the way someone really thinks. I might change their mood for a second, but I can't change how someone really thinks by some kind of short post. Like there's a lot of glory in the detail. I mean, there's a lot of change in the details. And so I think Dickens changed my mind from the ground up about that because of how long-winded his wording was. Living Bill James, he was the creator of Society of American Baseball Research and Sabermetrics. So anyone who's seen Moneyball, he's briefly mentioned in there, but he was basically the supporter of Billy Beane. So Billy Beane took a couple of his metrics and made Moneyball happen. And then Anna Wintour, so she's Miranda Priestley in The Devil Wears Prada. She's actually real. She's the creative director of Condé Nast.
That's a Met Gala lady, right?
Yes, same one. So her and Bill James would probably be my two living biggest creators.